Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth edition of Frontier Science Seminar Series. Today we have an interesting presentation, and we have distinguished speakers and moderator. Just let me share. This is the Frontier Science Seminar Series 2021. Our theme is Disrupting Stagnation, Empowering Africa's Future. The convener of this seminar series is Professor Bright Noiro. He's Associate Professor of Epidemiology at Institute of Medicine, Gothenburg University, Sweden. And I am Iman Sof, Associate Professor of Chest Diseases at Al-Azhar University, Cairo, Egypt. This is the fourth edition. The title of this fourth edition is The Role of Private Sector in Scientific Research in Africa. Our distinguished speaker is Mr. Oyo Akanmu. He is Executive Director, Retail Banking, First City Women Bank, Nigeria. And the moderator is Mr. Akanmu. He is a lecturer at the Adam Smith Business School, University of Glasgow, United Kingdom. And we have two distinguished speakers for My Career, My Story session, Dr. Mariamawit Yeshab and Dr. Dorcas Obiri. They will share with us their story in research and scientific research in Africa and diaspora. The outline of presentation: welcome note, introduction to Frontiers Initiative, presentation of the day, we have a short break discussion, and we have a seminar extra, My Career, My Story, with Dr. Mariamawit and Dr. Dorcas, and then closing. A short note about Frontiers Initiative. We have a science capacity building platform in Africa. Will provide training in career development, offering courses in scientific research process, science leadership training, enhancing science communication, mentoring of young African scientists, and science seminars and workshops. Our overreaching goal is to contribute to Africa's path to development. We are planning for Africa's development in science, a 3-year plan for scientific development and reawakening of excellence of scientific research among African scientists. We have two main different parts: African Scholars Research Methods course series. These are 4 courses: systematic reviews and meta-analysis, reproducibility in scientific research, crafting successful grant application, and the art of scientific writing and publishing. These courses will be repeated across the 3 years. And Frontier Science Seminar Series in 2021, our theme is Disrupting Stagnation and Empowering Africa's Future. And 2022 series spotlight of cutting edge of research across all research fields that are advancing Africa's development. Our anticipating milestones: free training of at least 500 young scholars, mentoring at least 50 young scholars in each course, collaboration with African institutes to provide capacity building courses to faculty members and students. And across this seminar series, we will disrupt stagnation and empower Africa's future. This is a plan for the 3 years. The courses will be repeated, and the Frontier series will go every 3 weeks, and each quarter have a different theme. In the previous two courses, systematic reviews and meta-analysis and reproducibility in scientific research, this was motivated words from different participants. They all say that they wish they have attended these courses before, and they wish these courses can be provided to different African scholars, either junior or during their career path. The teaching methodology used during the course was excellent, and the group work was advancing their skills. The Frontiers Initiative training, you don't only get new skills and knowledge, you can make new connections across Africa and collaborations. We mentor African scientists, and we have different research projects which are either finished or starting. Book smart versus street smart skills. Also, all recordings of the courses will be on YouTube channel, Frontiers channel, and there is Dr. Nawar's weekly nuggets, which give special skills and experiences in the journey of scientific research. Next training will be research funding and grant writing. The date will be announced soon. This is a plan for 2021 year and 2022 year. And we have distinguished African sons and daughters who are will be speakers in our courses. This is a list of confirmed speakers, and we have others. The seminar plans include recording of a seminar on YouTube channel, and we will have compiled work from the presentations which will be published and will be a guide for capacity building of scientific research in Africa. And the seminar extra series, My Career, My Story, will be a guide for those starting their journey either in Africa or in diaspora. This is a link for YouTube channel. Please check it, and don't forget to check previous recordings. And the next one will be deposited soon once we finish it. Today's moderator is Mr. Ike Gueno. He is entrepreneur, startup consultant, and academic. He is a specialist tutor of management at University of Glasgow, Adam Smith Business School. He's a founder and CEO of Seed Gap Innovations, Edinburgh, Scotland, United Kingdom. He's a PhD researcher in entrepreneurship and management at Glasgow School of Business and Society. He obtained his master's degree at Social Science Research Methods and Statistics from University of Glasgow, and has Master of Science in Economic Development from University of Glasgow also, and Bachelor of Science of Business Administration and Management, Andrews University, Michigan. His area of expertise and research interests include small business management, entrepreneurship, enterprise development, economic development, international business, and change management. He is an expert in his field, and I think he will provide us with excellent discussion regarding his expertise, and he will lead the discussion with the speaker and moderator. Here I ask my colleague, Dr. Bright, to introduce himself and to ask the moderator to introduce the speaker. Bright, are you here?
Yes, thank you very much, Eman, and welcome everyone to the 4th edition of this seminar series. We are privileged to have our distinguished speaker who will be introduced by my brother, friend, and colleague, Ike Gueno. So please relax and let's see what we can contribute in this journey of making Africa again. That is our dream. And we hope that these conversations will elicit active steps towards that. We implore you to take note as the speaker goes through his presentation, and I hope that we will form very engaging discussions at the end. Thank you very much. Ike is now over to you to take it from here and introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Bright. We have known ourselves from childhood, so not much to say about me. Bright doesn't know, and Iman as well. Got to know you really quickly today, and it's amazing to have such prestigious African people coming together to talk about Africa. I'm also excited to be able to introduce to you. In fact, I'll start that way. Say good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Olu Akanmu, Executive Director of Retail Banking for City Monument Bank, FCMB Limited. FCMB is a leading financial services institution in Nigeria with subsidiaries that are market leaders in their respective segments. Mr. Olu is going to talk to us about the role of private sector in scientific research in Africa. This is a subject in which we should all be deeply interested in, because a strong, dynamic, and sustainable basic research enterprise is both a foundation for progress for any country. My experience in Europe, in the UK, shows that no society can thrive, can grow without science and research, and actually private sector involvement in science and research. Mr. Akanmu has over 25 years of experience across the banking, telecommunications, advertising, and healthcare industries. His most recent experience was as the Chief Marketing Officer at the Airtel Networks of Nigeria. And prior to that, he headed the Retail and Consumer Banking Division of Bank PHB. He has also worked in various leadership positions in MTN Nigeria, Inside Communications, and Glasgow Nigeria Limited. Mr. Akanmu holds a bachelor's degree in pharmacy from Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, as well as MBA from Lagos State University. He has attended various managerial courses, including the Management Advancement Program, University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. And I'm quite excited to also know that he has gone through Heriot University, Edinburgh, here where I reside and work. Mr. Olu will be focusing on the public policy perspective of research and knowledge production in Africa, and the challenge of application of research knowledge to produce innovations that can solve industry and social problems in Africa. Without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcome Mr. Olu this evening, and let's relax and enjoy the discussion. Welcome, Mr. Olu.
Thank you very much, Ike, and everyone. Good evening. Let me see if I can quickly project my screen. Okay, good. Great. Once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me thank Dr. Nwaru, the convener of the Frontiers in Science, Dr. Sob, for the opportunity to share this perspective with you. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to talk a lot about DNAs and all this stuff, even though I started my life from science with a pharmacy degree. But I've since most of my life worked in business. And what I will be doing is to bring what I will call a microeconomics and public policy perspective to this discussion today. I think I'm very glad that our chairman is an economist, and therefore he will amplify properly in many areas in which that will need the right, much more detailed economic amplification beyond what I can coming from business. So let's go. Good. So I'll be talking to you today about the role of private sector in. Let me just do this something quickly. Okay, trying to. I will be talking to you today about the role of the private sector in scientific research in Africa. I'm just trying to find. Let me do this quickly. Okay, well, we'll manage. So I'll be adopting a public policy perspective in the discussion. Can we take the polling off? I think it's coming on the screen, I think. Maybe let me just put it off my screen. Good. Great. So there is the first thing I'd like us to do is to look at the definition of research.
Sorry to interfere, Mr. Olu. Could you use a screen share, show your screen? So
okay.
If you go on slideshow,
okay,
and then home.
Slideshow full.
If you click slideshow, and you can start from the current page. It's not using the slideshow at the moment.
Yes, I know that.
Did you intend to do that this way?
I think enable editing first. Enable editing, then you can make your slideshow. And enable editing up there.
Okay. Okay.
Then you have your slideshow on top there as well.
So you go click on slideshow.
Let me go find where the slideshow is.
On top, on top, on top. Yeah, there.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it.
And then from beginning, if you want to.
Okay, is it on slideshow now?
No.
Not yet.
Yeah, just click that again. Then you go to the left side. Have from beginning.
From beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it better now?
Just say okay. Yeah.
Great.
Perfect.
Great.
You are good.
Great. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you. Apologies. Okay. Right. So I'll be talking to you about the role of private sector in scientific research, and I will be speaking from a public policy, macroeconomic perspectives, and also from business perspective. The first thing I'd like to do is to share a couple of definitions. My first definition is, I find this in this chart very interesting from one of the leading European digital education institutes at the EIT Digital EU, in terms of what is the difference between research and innovation and how they connect themselves. And it has some relevant applications to what we are going to be discussing today. According to them, research is when you give money, and which is funding, research produces knowledge. And knowledge itself is applied is commercialized in an innovation process to produce money. And that money itself goes back into a cycle of research, which produces knowledge and innovation. This is very interesting because this cycle, we're going to talk a lot about it in the course of this presentation. But in terms of just a little bit of tweak, what I'd like to add to this chart is that it is not everything that is commercial. There are also innovations that is not necessarily about money. There are social innovations where we are solving social problems. That also follows the same route in which what is produced by innovation through the application of knowledge is not necessarily money, but it is a problem solved for society which impacts society positively beyond commercials. So a couple of key definitions, I just pick a couple of key definitions from Kwon Duong. This says that research, basic research, which we all know, a lot of scientists are on this seminar today. I also recognize that some of us are not necessarily scientists, so let me just quickly run through the definitions. That basic research is experimental or theoretical work undertaken primarily to acquire knowledge of fundamental original foundation of a phenomena with observable facts. But the key thing I want to underline here, which is important to our African discussion, is that basic research is done without any particular application or use in view. I will get back to these issues in the course of this presentation. Then applied research, on the other hand, is the original investigation carried out in an effort to acquire knowledge, but it is focused towards a useful aim and objective. And innovation largely they defined as invention of something new. But the World Bank, in its innovation policy guide for developing countries, defined innovation as technology and practices that are new to a given society. It says that they are not necessarily new in absolute terms. And I found it very interesting that they also said innovation is distinct from research. In fact, that it does not necessarily need to come from research. And innovation is driven largely by entrepreneurs, because innovation is largely a social process. And I'm sure we're also going to have some of this application from my chairman, who is a scholar of entrepreneurship. Innovation is a social process driven by entrepreneurship, but we'll link it back to where we are coming from. Taking knowledge from research, taking it into an innovation production process to solve social problems, and of course, producing either money commercially or solving social problems. So in terms of key takeouts, is that research is production of knowledge, and innovation is the application of knowledge to solve industry or social problems. So if we extrapolate it further, we could say that research as knowledge production is done by academia and the universities. Largely, we will question that later on. And the application or commercialization of knowledge is done by industry, profit or non-profit, to solve social problems. The private sector ideally largely works in the innovation space, which means that the academia and the universities are producing knowledge, and the industry is taking that knowledge into an innovation production process to create solutions to industry and social problems. The triple helix framework. Some gentlemen, some in 1995, by the name of Escovis, for those of us who might not be familiar with this, is a very important framework. We're going to discuss this a lot in the course of this presentation. Escovis and his colleague, they studied the evolution of research and development in Massachusetts and the role of MIT, how it spun off and worked closely with industry, and the kind of cycle of R&D from university, the entrepreneurial orientation of MIT, is close collaboration, especially from its engineering department, with the computer science industry like Digital Electric Corporation and a whole lot of them. And they came up with this theory of the triple helix framework, which essentially says that to innovate, for society to innovate from research and development to innovation, you need a collaboration of government, university, and industry working in an interlocking triple helix. That is when we will get the best of R&D and innovation, both for industry and in terms of solving social problems. And this is what they documented from the experience of MIT as an entrepreneurial university, working closely with industry into companies like Digital Electric Corporation in Massachusetts. In fact, the framework enabled a university like MIT, we came later than Harvard, to build a reputation of its own. And one of the things we're going to be discussing today is how does this kind of triple helix R&D innovation framework, an interlocking framework of how government, industry, and academia should cooperate, applies to Africa in the context of private sector research. One of the things I want to put for us for discussion today is that the triple helix, as described by Escovis and his colleagues, which has also been applied to many parts of the world. In fact, Stanford University took the triple helix framework and even did much better than MIT in terms of its orientation and cooperation with a Silicon Valley industry and a whole lot of other industry that came out from the process. So the first thing I'd like to put to us is that the triple helix framework in Africa is delinked, it is broken, and is silo confinement. And therefore, it has very serious implications for the whole concept of R&D and innovation development in Africa. The interlocking nature of a triple helix as described as we see it in Europe or in the United States, in MIT, Stanford, Silicon Valley, and so on, is not what we have here. And there are very serious implications. Our universities, our industries, and our government are all sitting largely in silo with fairly insignificant cooperation among themselves in terms of research and innovation development in Africa. In fact, Kimatu, he developed, this is an African, developed some interesting propositions on the triple helix framework. His theory, it was that the triple helix framework actually we need to backtrack it. And he said that the triple helix framework starts in 3 stages. A situation which we have like in Africa, where everything, where the university, the industry, and government are largely sitting in silo without any form of significant cooperation, strong cooperation with themselves. And it came to another model in which there is a loose cooperation between the two. And of course, in his view, it is when we have a much more matured economy, for example, a much more mature university industry cooperation that you now have the interlocking triple helix framework. In applying this Kimatu model, what I actually want to put across to us, share with us, is that we seem in Africa to have been stuck perpetually in the early stage of formation of the triple helix in terms of the university, industry, and academic cooperation. Africa is now, for most of African countries, we're at least 50 years or 60 years in terms of independence. But we seem not to have been able to move from this silo, delinked, and broken nature of the way our triple helix is sitting between university, industry, and government. And we are not moving forward in terms of any potential, significant potential to have an interlocking cooperation of academia, industry, and government. And that has some significant implications in terms of R&D and innovation research in Africa. The triple helix itself is, like I said, is sometimes a function of economic development. And therefore, you find that in a place like South Africa, which is a little bit more, which is much more developed than the rest of Africa, even though South Africa too is a developing country, the triple helix in South Africa, I would say, will look more like this second stage of the Kimatu triple helix model, where university, industry, and government are there, but the cooperation is very loose. It's much better than most of Africa, where likely what universities are getting from government is funding for teaching. And there's virtually very little going on between university and industry, or between government and industry. And we'll I will share a couple of more details on this in the course of the presentation. So there are 2 central arguments which I'll be putting forward in this discussion. One is that the African triple helix model of government, academia, industry collaboration is broken, delinked, and largely siloed, like I've discussed, with implications for research as knowledge production and innovation as industry application of knowledge to solve industry and social problems in Africa. The second is that the African innovation ecosystem itself, even when you have taken knowledge produced by university, in terms of the innovation production system itself, in terms of the innovation ecosystem, the African innovation ecosystem itself suffers from poor ecosystem player linkages and implied complementarities, which constrains and decelerates knowledge application as innovation production. And I'll be talking to these 2 central themes in the course of the presentation. Now, in terms of the academia and industry linkages in Africa, the things that are sticking out empirically, to me, for example, and will be that the private sector does not know how it could be helped by academia in Africa. It sees the academia as in a different abstract world, not directly relevant to what it does or to its problem. The industry cannot commercialize a knowledge that it does not know, even if the research knowledge exists. If we say that industry is supposed to commercialize knowledge through innovation production process, but if the industry does not know the knowledge that is produced by academia, it cannot commercialize that knowledge in an innovation process and be relevant in terms of scientific and scientific development R&D in Africa. And both sides, in terms of the universities and the academia, the universities and industry have significant roles to play to solve this problem. In a further study of the interface issues between academia and industry by Georgie Harvis and colleagues in Portugal, this is a European study. They found out that, in summary of their paper, is that in terms of the issues of university, our universities tend to be closed scientific communities. We want to be scientists. We want to sometimes just do basic research and live within that closed scientific community, which is like a bubble. Academics are unfamiliar with market and industry structures for them to talk, to get the attention of business and industry. And universities, even in Europe, usually lack the proper mechanisms to disseminate research knowledge to industry. In terms of industry issues, industries typically have short-term visions. For us in business, it is about what have you produced? We're going to go to the stock exchange every 3 months. So if we are going to do anything with the industry, what are you bringing? How is it going to enhance my profitability? Industry tend to have short-term vision. Meanwhile, in research, scientists go at their own pace. They have a long-term vision. And that sometimes creates a major conflict issues between the two. Then there's insufficient absorption capacity for technology appropriation by industry. So you can have research, but there's something in innovation science we call absorption capacity. The capability to absorb knowledge and use it can be constrained by the nature of IFA, for example, which is sometimes even a more pronounced problem when you look at Africa. Number 3 is that there is insufficient resources available when a whole lot of business are SMEs. There's a general rule in macroeconomics that the bigger, the more efficient. When you have a whole lot of SMEs, they do not have the resources to apply, to take the knowledge from universities and apply it in terms of innovation solutions. And of course, difficulties by firms in terms of identifying their technological needs. Many firms don't even know what they need because they're also living in their own bubbles. Georges and Harvis, they went on to say that industry and academia have different time frames for research. In industry, we have a short-term concrete outcome outlook versus long-term loose outcome outlook by the academia. We have different attitudes towards cooperation objectives. We are looking at profit. So the academia is looking at knowledge production, sometimes for knowledge production's sake. We have different understanding of the role of research. For us in business, it's about if it is worth it, it must be confidential so that we can exploit it privately. In academia, you have a public orientation and openness for dissemination, whereas we want to keep it confidential so that we can exploit it. So a different understanding of the role of research between business, industry, and academia. Of course, because we have different backgrounds, we have communication challenges. When we talk to each other, we don't understand each other because we have different cultures and different ways of work. And of course, there is largely intellectual property rights issues between, if we work together, who owns what, which is largely foggy area, which creates a whole lot of conflict, even in a few instances, even in advanced countries where universities and industries cooperate. Now, if you have this kind of challenges in Europe, where this study was done, you can imagine that the friction in Africa, where the triple helix is less formed, will be much more amplified given the weak industry and university linkage structures in Africa. Now, we looked at South Africa earlier, and we said that South Africa is probably not completely linked. It's more eligible because in middle income Africa, there's a loose connection, even though there's a connection, but it's loose. And some of these facts are speaking to, even in South Africa, in Africa that is a little bit, that is much more, there's a middle income country, there's even a challenge of that university academia cooperation. South Africa, universities in South Africa produces 91% of total South African population. However, South African universities are producing only 14% of South African patents, according to a paper from Patra and Mushi in 2018. Only 3 universities are responsible for both patenting and publication portfolio in South Africa. The joint collaborative patents between universities and industry in South Africa is just 19%. That tells us that even in middle-income South Africa, a more advanced part of Africa, the cooperation between universities and industry is very low. So they concluded in their study that South African universities need to collaborate more with industries, particularly with local industries, to achieve the entrepreneurial university, which is the MIT model, a university that is oriented towards industry in terms of patents and technology transfer. And I'll just share a couple of data, a couple of slides about the challenge of the visibility of R&D spending in Africa. This is a slide from a UNESCO publication, and you see this in terms of this chart is about R&D spending by country, and as a percentage of GDP on the right. You find that you would need to struggle to identify Africa. This spending by R&D spending as a percent of GDP is towards the corner on the bottom of the right that you will see South Africa and Egypt, and you will have to struggle to identify them. That tells us that in terms of R&D spending in Africa, that we are not very visible. And I'm not saying anything new, it's very obvious for all of us. Another chart from UNESCO, top 50 R&D spenders in terms of share R&D expenditures by business sector. In top 15, Africa is not there. But what is more important in this study, and I think Dr. Warren must have shared this slide in one of his presentations, is that you will notice here that the private sector is actually the biggest R&D spender in many of these countries, in the first world. And therefore, the private sector critically have a role to play in terms of R&D spend. But the question is in Africa, and a private sector that does not even have any form of significant structural deliberate link with its knowledge production sector in terms of university, it will be a challenge for us to get to this point unless we fix that broken helix problem. Further data, this is from the World Bank publication in terms of innovation policy guide for developing countries. Top R&D companies from developing and emerging economies. We do not have any Africa representation. We have the Samsungs and so on, the big corporations. And this is pointing to a problem of size. When our corporations are too small in Africa, they can also not do good R&D because there's a correlation between the size of farms in Africa are too small, and therefore it also affects their capability to do R&D on scale. What I want to point out here in this chart is that we have Petrobras of Brazil, which for Nigerians is the equivalent of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. So a Petrobras in Brazil is very much involved in R&D. One of the things we need to ask ourselves, especially for us in Nigeria, is that how can we engage in Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation with the resources that it has to do better cooperative research with our university? Because that's an example of a big corporation. It's got size and it's got resources like Petrobras, but we're not seeing NMP's, Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, do any form of research significantly, and I'm sure the same thing applies to many of our other African countries. Another interesting data: number of developing economic companies in the global 1,000. The only part of Africa that is present in terms of this chart, global 1,000, is South Africa. The instituted patents granted to top 15 developing and emerging companies in 2008. Again, only South Africa is present. So Africa, we are not present, at least like you say, we are not present in terms of R&D, in terms of globally. And what are we going to do now? So in looking at those data, the World Bank looked at Africa is not doing, the private sector in Africa is not doing good R&D. And they identified these issues as the reasons why by the International Finance Corporation, why private sector in developing countries like Africa do very little research. The first one is that for firms in developing countries, it is cheaper for them to buy or copy existing foreign technology rather than do risky R&D, given that most developing country firms are far away behind the technology frontier. Number two is that the domestic markets in Africa are generally less competitive, with very little incentives for firms to innovate. If firms are big in Africa, they are probably doing so because they have a good government relationship. Competition is what drives innovation. And a whole lot of our big firms in Africa have a way of capturing institutions. Therefore, they are not under pressure. They are like near monopolies in their own right. And therefore, they do not have sufficient incentives to innovate, even for the big corporations. Many of them lack scientists and engineers to undertake formal R&D. Most firms in Africa are too small with constrained resources for R&D, which we are discussing. The cost of capital is generally higher given risk in Africa compared to developed economies, which further amplifies the risk of R&D. R&D is a long-term thing. And therefore, if cost of capital is high and you are undertaking longer R&D, it amplifies risk, particularly for business and industry. And therefore, they will shy away from doing long-term R&D. Then there's the unconducive and unstable volatile macroeconomic environment, which is not conducive to lengthy and long-term R&D. We all know that our government policy changes with every election in Africa. And there's poor intellectual property protection regimes that do not protect innovation and research from being copied and appropriated cheaply by others. And there's a high transitional cost of setting up and operating firms in developing countries. This is a study by International Finance Corporation. And they are very relevant to many of African countries. So how do we solve this Africa's linked, broken, and siloed triple helix problem? How do we move from this broken siloed model here to what we have in the MITs in the Silicon Valley on the right? Before we go into the solution issues, I want to just share this example. As for me, I find this very classic of Nigeria in terms of the complete linkage between academia and industry in Nigeria. The Nigeria Economic Summit Group, for our friends from outside Nigeria, is the private sector think tank, is a large formal body of industry that works with government in terms of lobby and economic policy. Every year they have a major economic policy conference with government. Then we also have the Nigeria Economic Society, which is the academic society of economics professors in Nigerian universities. They publish Nigerian Journal of Economic Research, something like that. But in the last 10 years, you have never seen the Nigeria Economic Summit Group and the Nigeria Economic Society coming together to do anything together. Even though the agenda of both organizations is the same. It tells us how it is a classic example of the linkage between industry and academia. You can extrapolate this to many areas of business where industry is on one hand and the universities are living, both sides are living in their own bubble. Now, the key problems that Africa's research and innovation must solve are the things I listed here. I just listed a couple of things they do. More than that, poverty and inclusion, industrialization, jobs and employment, solving our potential demographic catastrophe and turning into a dividend. Because we have a lot of young people, if you don't create jobs for them, we have a problem from North Africa to South Africa to West Africa. Is a major problem. Agriculture, food security and productivity, leveraging technology, inclusive and affordable healthcare, energy poverty, shelter and housing poverty, digital inclusion, financial and broadband, transportation, connecting our rural population better to market, and even urban transportation in our cities, water, sanitation, and sewage, which connects back to healthcare, inclusive quality education and shared mobility. Now, we discussed basic research, we discussed applied research earlier, and we discussed innovation. In my view, if knowledge production factories in the universities are not speaking to these issues. If universities if we are producing knowledge for knowledge sake, and we're not talking some of these issues, it will be very difficult for people on the innovation side, on the society side, to appreciate what the universities are doing. And therefore, for both of us, both on the innovation side in terms of the industry and in terms of academics, these are the problems that we need to tackle together, from knowledge production to innovation to solve industry problems, so that research and innovation impact positively on Africa. Now, strengthening university-industry collaborations. The World Bank, in its Innovation Policy Guide for Developing Countries 2010, recommends these things, and I'll run through them quickly, and I'll speak about the commonalities through them, among them. They recommend technology transfer offices in universities, science parks, business incubators at universities, special economic zones, industry and geographic clusters, which builds on natural endowments in that we have in our different geographies. If a university is an agricultural environment, it should have a strong agricultural orientation. We can build agricultural industry around that university in terms of a geographic cluster, working together between government, university, and industry. Structured and deliberate city innovation program, the kind that we have seen Silicon Valley and Stanford with the tech industry. University is the origin of great companies like Google, like Cisco, but with a city innovation program with Silicon Valley and an entrepreneurial university like Stanford. How can we build that even on an African scale within Africa, within our different geographies within Africa? Matching grants and tax subsidies for cooperation between universities and business by government. Legislation and policy that forces us to cooperate together between industry and universities, and of course the wider adoption, and I put in there the wider adoption of the entrepreneurial university model, the kind of things that, like I said, we see with MIT and Stanford. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. Even within simple things like agriculture, we can have a stronger orientation, a stronger entrepreneurial orientation from our universities, and an industry that knows that the university can help to solve this problem, working together in cooperation with cities to build science parks, industry clusters, to ensure that the linkage between our elites that is broken is fixed. But the common thing in this thread is that in an Africa where resources are constrained, you need a geographic cluster strategy so that you don't disseminate resources all over the place. If we have a geographic cluster, a science park, you make sure that broadband is best there. You make sure that infrastructure and interconnection is best there. And we can concentrate resources there and begin to build clusters of knowledge, clusters of innovation around our universities and industry. And some of the companies I will start from here, and the chairman will probably talk about our startups. Some of these startups are going to grow bigger over the future, because even Google itself was a small company many years ago in Silicon Valley. But a cluster strategy, bringing university, industry, and together with government producing the enabling environmental infrastructure for this is going to be very important to solve the linkage between the broken triple helix problem that we have in many parts of our African countries. Further to this suggestion by World Bank, let me add a couple of things more to it. Our universities can do research open day for industry in terms of interdisciplinary basis. Remember that we said that industry does not even know what university is doing. So research open days by university will be a suggestion. We can do practice professors, bringing experienced industry practitioners into academics in Africa. I know, for example, that our regulators in Africa are very, when they hear practice professors, I've been in some conversation with some NUC people in Nigeria, and they are very concerned about how to regulate standards. But we've got to move to models like you see in the United States, where people can come from industry and come to universities to teach, and in the process also help to build that linkage between what the industry needs and academia. Practice professors bring out industry practitioners into academics. Sabbaticals and attachment for academics. academics, you do not necessarily have to go to another universities for your sabbatical. How can we work with industry so that some of the sabbaticals that professors want to do are done in industry, and you can know a problem of industry, and industry can know that the resources to solve their problem are in the universities. Industry and company-specific professorial chair and endowment tied to industry and socially applicable knowledge production. One of the things I want to point out here is that in Nigeria, for example, what I see is that our universities are much more interested in infrastructure funding than research and innovation partnerships when they are raising funds from industry. It's about how do we build the next classroom or the next lecture theater. You hardly find university endowment offices talking to industry about professorial chair. It's about the next building, the next infrastructure. So how do we build industry and company professorial chair endowment as a way of life between industry and universities in Africa? Then leveraging better professional associations in subjects like engineering, pharmacy, medicine, so that industry, we are members. For example, I have a pharmacy degree, and I know that in a pharmaceutical society, there's a corporate, there is an academic pharmacist, there's industrial pharmacist, there's community pharmacist. How do we use the common knowledge of those professional associations to build stronger cooperation between industry and academics? And I would say that even in the pharmaceutical society of Nigeria, there's very little cooperation going on between academics and industry in terms of solving problems. Then the last thing I'll put in there is that the need for interdisciplinary case study pedagogy that orients university teaching towards real-life industry and social problems rather than cram and pour. My experience as a student was that we did very little case studies. We were just, it was about how much can you remember and regurgitate. And an academic teaching that is oriented towards case and problem solving begins to orient academic teaching itself towards what is the problem that the students are going to need to solve when they get out of school. So that will, this kind of a kind of case study oriented pedagogy will also force industry, academia to cooperate. So going towards the conclusion or the end of my presentation, the second part in terms of the innovation ecosystem linkages and complementarities in Africa. You might have said that, yes, there's knowledge production, but even when you want to innovate itself, there's knowledge itself. There's a challenge of ecosystem linkages and complementarities, even within the ecosystem, outside the university itself, even for a company that wants to innovate in Africa. Innovation is not done in silos, but within ecosystem complementarities and linkages. Africa suffers from poor ecosystem linkages and complementarities, affecting commercialization of knowledge and social innovations. This is a very interesting story I'd like to share on the Nigerian astronaut. It's a real life story from which I picked from some of the publications I got across to in the course of preparing for this presentation. And I'll just go through it and read it for you. Very interesting. Professor Isong, who was the Nigerian Minister of Science and Technology in 2007, and on page 91 of his book, was launching a book at the time. He said something like, it is the objective of Nigeria to produce the Nigerian astronaut by 2015 and launch a manufactured satellite by 2018 from a launch site in Nigeria on a launch vehicle made in Nigeria. Then Professor Yuwale Tomori, the president of the Nigeria Academy of Sciences, rhetorically replied, if your son or daughter is an astronaut on the Nigerian spaceship, you will not want PHCN, which is the National Electricity Corporation, to cut power anytime with the ground control base. Neither will you hope that the telecommunication system will ever report network busy, during which there will be no communication with the satellites and spaceships. You will expect that the president will submit the budget on time, and that the House and the Senate to approve the allocation to the space program on time, effortlessly without hassle. I think this story just summarizes that even if you want to innovate, there are significant complementarities and ecosystem issues that just affect the innovation system process itself, which we also need to fix in terms of private sector innovation and R&D in Africa. And some of the issues also discussed earlier in terms of solving the linkage problem also addresses this problem. Concentrate resources in few geographic areas so that all the linkages are established, especially economic zones, industrial and geographic clusters, structure and deliberate city innovation programs, making sure that even if resources are meager, have 3 or 4 or 5 areas where you have centers of excellence, and you can concentrate all your best infrastructure, knowledge, talent in one place, and you can fix, and of course, industry, university can cooperate with government, and can fix the linkage problem. Other issues in terms of ecosystem issues that affect commercialization and knowledge of innovation in Africa, in my views, are things like government policy and regulation we have discussed, the breadth and depth of ecosystem players and linkages. That is another area we can just go into. That can be another innovation discussion. The structure and infrastructure, soft and hard, technology and digital maturity. This is the days of digital. What is the state of technology and digital maturity in Africa? Talent development and pipeline structure in terms of both universities and vocational education, because talent in technology is not going to come from universities alone. What we are seeing with technology today is that a whole lot of people are learning computer science outside universities. Those training schools that are training people in coding, how do they work with universities in terms of what is the policy? How do we cooperate in terms of pipeline structure for talent development? Of course, how do we take advantage of natural endowment and advantages that we have either around the university or around an industry working together in terms of innovation R&D? So in conclusion, just 1 or 2 more slides to go. Just emphasize the role of the state. I cannot finish the presentation without talking about Mazzucato Mariana. This is a professor in the University College in London. She identified in a book, a seminal book, The Entrepreneurial State, Debunking Private Sector and Public Sector Myth, that what we see today in terms of the smartphone technologies in America of Apple, Google, and all of them, was that they built on high-risk research which was conducted by US Department of Defense. And that the state itself has critical role to play in terms of funding high-risk research that private sector will not do at the beginning. If we have that problem, if that gap is, if those high-risk research were not done by the Department of Defense at the time, there might not have been those technologies that Apple and Google apply today to do things like GPS, smartphone technology today. So the state itself, as we are talking of the entrepreneurial university, we also need to talk about the entrepreneurial state and, of course, the entrepreneurial industry itself, all of everybody working together in terms of fixing the triple helix provoking problems in Africa. So in conclusion, even though this discussion is about private sector, you have seen me talking about the triple helix. That is because you cannot solve the industry problem in terms of private sector research and development without looking at how it interfaces with the government and universities. Collaboration of government, industry, private sector, and universities are critical in solving Africa's research and innovation challenge. Even within the context of Africa's limited resources, this remains valid. Much more can be achieved by industry, academia, and government with deliberate and structured cooperation in producing knowledge and innovation that solves Africa's problem. The difference can start from all of us. There are some of us from industry here, there are a whole lot of them from academics. The difference can start from you in fixing the Africa's broken triple helix problem. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, reach out to other players. I saw your bubble now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, our distinguished speaker. Can you stop sharing so that
okay,
we can see ourselves? Thank you very much. Ike, you're still around?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
yes.
Please go ahead. I have slides of the questions, so when it's question time, I can show those slides so I can see the questions written.
Okay. So I'm going to be brief, really brief, because it's going to be a long evening now. It does seem that a lot of people have questions for you, Mr. Olu. But thank you for this. What should I call it? You opened the eyes of Africa in a very interesting way. And as you were talking, there were a few notes I was taking. As an economist myself, as someone who is excited about innovation and how we can bring innovation in Africa, you really hit the nail at the head. And today, what you've done in summary is to break down the problem of Africa in actually driving economic development in Africa. We have not looked at this model of triple helix. So looking at it, what is academia doing, what is industry doing, and what is the public sector doing? In fact, these three key partners must work together. From my experience, 15 years in public service, everything we do in the UK is informed by research. As a government, as the public, and you can see already the issues around COVID-19, the AstraZeneca vaccine is from academia. And this couldn't be possible without the funding coming from the public. In effect, what you have just told us today is that Africa needs to reevaluate its approach to economic development. In fact, the way we develop our society. I'll go quickly to say that you started by introducing what triple helix is and how countries should look at it from more in terms of academic perspective, but you really didn't go into academia, which is really very interesting because you tried to bring it home in a way that made more meaningful everyone listening today, not just in terms of the academic people in this audience. So you began by laying clearly and to explain the problem of a broken system whereby we are not, as a continent, are not working together, all the three key partners there, the education sector and the industry, and again, the academia, industry, and the education sector not working together. And you showed this in your evidence throughout on the various parameters that actually drive innovation and R&D capabilities of a people and all that. And the key problem we are facing in Africa is that we are nowhere to be found in this whole story. That Africa can actually be seen when you look at the data. Where is Africa investing? What is Africa doing globally? And that showed, again, when I go back to the recent issues that are about vaccine production in the world, Africa was nowhere to be seen, even though Africans experts across the world are participating, but we are participating in other countries. We're participating in other academic environments, which is really something Africa needs to rethink about. One thing that interests me so much is when you talked about a case study-oriented curriculum, whereby we in Africa should review our curriculum, not just regurgitating knowledge in terms of theory, but actually thinking about how we can practicalize knowledge. And you didn't only say we should look at entrepreneurial universities, but you also think about entrepreneurial states. And that for me was really kicking. As an academic myself, I am more interested in entrepreneurship. I've emphasized a lot on entrepreneurial universities and what we do here in Glasgow and Edinburgh to be one of the world's leading entrepreneurial universities. But I am interested in this idea of entrepreneurial states. And in terms of research, we should actually look at this. It's important for Africa, especially where you have a broken system where industry and the public as well as academia are not working together. We need to find a solution that works for Africa. You looked at innovation also in terms of social component of that, while innovation would be very much looked at in terms of enterprise, but innovation here, you dealt with it both in terms of enterprise and as well as a social solution for Africa. And I'm quite interested in the idea of triple helix, but the way it works for Africa. The collaboration that is needed between all the key players. And I would say, thank you for your time to actually bring all these things together. I hope I have been able to actually sum this in the 2 minutes that is given to me. So the floor is open for questions. And there is Bright, there's a hand up already. Do we take the questions or should Mr. Olu?
I think we can start with the ones that have already been asked. Just a minute, I will show this here now.
Okay.
And then we can take from those who are raising their hands.
Okay.
Okay. So do you want to read it from there, or you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I can go on. You can go on.
Okay. So the first question, Mr. Olu, is what are the main challenges for developing innovation systems in our continent?
These are big issues. I would say they will still likely be around. A lot of the pegs are in the presentation in terms of policy or government, in terms of talent and pipeline, in terms of infrastructure, and in terms of linkages and the breadth and depth of players. And of course, the other one is capital. And one of the things you also notice in terms of the way Silicon Valley works is that you got Stanford, you got industries, you got an entrepreneurial orientation towards society, you got industry built around it, and you also have the venture capital firms also built around the same place. So capital is also there. So it's like all the ingredients that are needed in terms of capital, talent, university knowledge are agglomerated in the same place. That is the kind of model that we need to build in Africa. And some of our key cities, we don't have to have it everywhere. Some of us are cities like Lagos, like Nairobi, like Cairo. We can create a part of that city where we agglomerate all the ingredients that are needed in one cluster, and it will just blow itself up. But there's going to be an initial heavy lifting that needs to be done between government and visionary vice chancellors or visionary leaders of universities. In the MIT study, they gave a lot of credit to some of the early pioneers of MIT because they were far-sighted about how to make a difference. That's what we need in terms of the leadership of our universities, and of course, working with government. So we need visionaries on both sides to solve the problem. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Right. Okay. There's a second question there for you, Mr. Olu. How can indigenous knowledge be used to promote responsible people's need-based innovations in our continent? So,
this is a very good question about, it also speaks to, we don't have to, we should take the best in terms of knowledge is fungible, in my view. Yes, Africa, yes, indigenous knowledge, but in my view, we've had some of these interesting debates. If technologies are already available that solve our problem, let's not go and reinvent the wheel. If there's, for example, a WhatsApp group or a Zoom from which we can use to do a meeting, let's not overcarry this indigenous thing and say we want our own. Let's go and adapt what is best available and solve and leapfrog. Because sometimes I think when we talk of this indigenous Africa thing, it sometimes sounds like let's abandon, let's do something from the scratch. So we must be great in leapfrogging, apply the best, but we must apply it contextually in an innovative way to solve our problems in Africa. And I think that's where our universities, for example, and our industries need to work more closely with society. There's a whole lot of knowledge, I agree, in terms of what is out there. Something like traditional medicine, the treatment of sickle cell, that are already available that we can put back to science, get the science of it, and of course, commercialize. So I agree, but I think we should just make sure we balance it. In our attempt to connect to indigenous knowledge, we should not go and be reinventing the wheel. We should accelerate, take the best of what's available and leapfrog in Africa. Because we're already 50 years behind.
We'll take one more question and then we will go look at those who raised their hand. There was a third one there, Bright, or you want me to take this?
Beyond the triple helix, there is the quadruple helix. The quadruple helix incorporates non-governmental organizations and and innovative individuals from the general public into the innovation development processes. What is or are the major challenges for NGOs to take center stage in innovation development on the continent?
This is a very good question. The quad helix is the development on the triple helix that brings society into that helix. I think one thing that also defines Africa is that our civil society is weak. Our civil society is weak. Overseas, you need a strong society to put pressure on government industry to do the right thing. We need strong NGOs. We need good elections where people's voices can be heard. We need civil societies that are working in many areas that are putting pressure on industry, government to solve problems. So I agree with the perspective. Thank you for bringing that up in terms of the quad helix. But what I want to point out is that we must collectively work together to build a strong civil society. The system that we run today weakens our civil society as a moderator of what is going on between industry, universities, and other players like government and politicians. So we need that. I agree. That's one area we need to work on. We need a very strong non-profit civil society industry to moderate and put pressure on everybody to knock us together to cooperate and make sure we are doing the right thing.
Okay, before we go to the fourth question, I'll let Professor Amechi ask the question there because he's been raising a few hands up, so we let him ask. Professor Amechi.
Okay, hi, good evening, everyone, and Chief Olu, good to listen to you.
Thank you.
As always, I know your ideas are usually very radical, and you always try to challenge us. I think my question is a comment, inviting us to reflect on what you have said. I like the example with the US, with MIT, and the role they played, and so on and so forth. And I also liked the question you asked, the Venn diagram that's kind of scattered in Africa, and it's about how do we bring the two together? I mean, how do we bring the three together? And I thought that for me caught my attention. I was trying to see how you could resolve that puzzle, but you quickly moved on to some of the suggestions you made. But I'm just wondering if we can move back a bit, right? And think about the nature of African societies now, because there are different African countries, and also the nature of the state, because you're talking about government, private sector, and universities, and you're asking them to do what I suspect probably they were not equipped to do because of the nature of the state we inherited in Africa, the nature of the private sector we inherited in Africa, and probably also the nature of the university system we inherited. Wouldn't we need to reflect on those, probably transcend or find ways of overcoming those challenges before we can get to where you want us to? Because the state, to a large extent in Africa, the government, or what we call nation states or countries today, are constructed from colonial interests. They were not there to serve the people. They are not there to think about private sector. And even the idea of the market, the private sector in Africa, to a large extent, was extractive to support the colonial interests. I suspect also that the universities are not there to support either the government or the market. So going back to that fundamental disjuncture probably might help us to start rethinking. Otherwise, you're asking us to do things, use things that are not equipped to do the kind of things you want them to do to solve the problem. So it's I'm not trying to be pessimistic or dim here in my view, but a question of us kind of reflecting, because the institutions in America, in Europe, they have histories. They didn't just happen. So how do we come in with that realization to then create a new Africa? Because if Bright is saying Africa again or something like that, we need to rethink, and somebody needs to do that work. Maybe that's part of what we are doing here, but inviting ourselves to rethink our starting point and how institutions emerge. Yeah, it's not a question really, just kind of comment.
Very well. Do you want to respond to that?
No. I mean, I don't have any. I agree with the comments. There's a whole lot. I mean, what Prof is talking about, is a whole issue of economic development and institutions in Africa, and it touches so many things, and the path that we need to figure out. I agree with the comment. I think, what if we agree that there is where we are, and there is where we need to get to, then maybe part of the discussions will be what is the part of the linkage. And that could be subject of other discussions in the future. What's very interesting about this discussion is that this is supposed to be a science discussion. But it's very interesting because at the end of the day, science and innovation is a shared process. And I'm very glad about even if the interdisciplinary discussion that is happening here. We're talking science, we're talking economics, we're talking development, and they are all very linked. So there is a stream of thought that could be taken out of some of these sessions in terms of the part of that linkage, which I agree it is a low lot of thought process. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. That's a question.
Yeah. So there is another hand, Prof. Charles Ayo.
Yeah. Yes.
I've omitted him.
Okay.
Thank you, Bright. And thank you, Mr. Akanmu, for that wonderful presentation. I must confess, well thought out. Mine is no question, but a little contributions talking about the way out. I've benefited greatly, but let me, as a Nigerian, I have about 4 decades teaching experience in the tertiary institutions here, and far back as 2005, the captains of the industry pronounced Nigerian graduates unemployable. Since that time, our graduates have been categorized or described as lacking in the skill set required in the world of work. Fortunately, I had the privilege of being the Vice Chancellor of Covenant University at the time, and I introduced some radical measures from government. No doubt about it, there's a disconnect. According to the National Universities Commission, only students in the sciences and engineering can proceed to industrial training. During my tenure, I made it compulsory for all, whether you're in the sciences or whatever, during the long vacation, you must proceed. And that experience came from the fact that I had the privilege under the France government to have a 1-week visit to some universities in France. And I noticed 80% of their graduates, immediately after graduation, they get employment. 10% could start their own businesses immediately, and just only 10% would proceed to postgraduate studies. What did I do? Having noticed the disconnect, I started in Covenant University that time, monthly town and gown seminar series. If the captains of the industry are not accepting our graduates, let us bring them to the classroom. Come give a seminar. And so every program in a month must host experts in the industry to put them through. And at the postgraduate level, it is compulsory. When I've left now for another university, it is compulsory. After your coursework, you must go on internship to the industry where you work on your proposal. And then coming back to school, we appoint someone in the place where you had your internship, and then an academic professor to supervise you. And if you work the trajectory of Covenant from the beginning till that, it stands out among others. So for our colleagues asking about the way out, if we wait for government, we may waste. is just for the leaders of the university setting to add value to the graduates by introducing some innovative measures that will bring closer, that is a way of bridging the gap between town and gown. I know after this, without taking much of our time, I'm going to link up with Akanmu because we have a lot of problems to solve here in Nigeria, and his presentation today will just go a long way in solving some of the problems. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Let me commend you for the work at Covenant. Covenant University students, very clear the vision shows. Covenant University students in Nigeria show very clearly in terms of science and computer, science and engineering. It's a place where a whole lot of companies want to recruit. And I'm not surprised with the kind of orientation that I can understand where that was coming from, that different from just going to a university where you learn theory and you regurgitate and you get a 2-1, but you do not know how to solve any problem. So well done for the good work, sir. And it's good.
Thank you, my appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so you want me to show the next questions? Okay.
Yes.
Just give me a minute, I show this.
If anyone has questions, just use the chat function to ask your questions. I think it's question 4. Mr. Olu, there's another question there for you. And the question is, how do you develop policies that circumvent a lot of the red tape bureaucracies in place in many African countries that inhibit the development of the triple helix collaboration?
Because it's part of what Professor Omechi referred to as our inheritance. Yeah. Africa needs a lot of sheer change. There's a whole lot of work of institution building that needs to happen. For institutions to change, there's objective and subjective conditions. Africa needs a lot of change agents. We cannot change everything. I like the way Prof discussed. Covenant University showed an entrepreneurial orientation that challenged, as a private university, challenged the traditional old universities in Nigeria, and everybody began to follow. So maybe what we need to do is start building highlands of excellence in certain places, and those practices will begin to radiate and percolate into larger society. I don't think we can change Africa just at a go, but just like we have seen with Covenant University, for example, in terms of an entrepreneurial orientation. So there are many things to do. Make a difference in your own space whenever you can. And this part of the initiative, and we're even talking and discussing this, I think is well worth it. But I agree there's a whole lot to do in terms of institutional change in Africa. We need change leaders, we need change agents, but we must not lose hope, because Africa will be better.
Thank you, Mr. Olu. The question there is, universities have alumni in government, industry, and in government, industry, and I would think that is academia. Can university alumni catalyze research and innovation in their respective sectors? And how can universities tap into these critical mass of alumni to foster the entrepreneurial?
In fact, one of the things recommended by, I've also been very active in the British Council Global Conference on Higher Education as well, Commonwealth Universities, in some of the things I've done in some in the past. One of the things that has been recommended for African universities is to connect and leverage its alumni network. Basic things like, where do we even turn to? Meanwhile, this is the same university that has produced 50,000 graduates who are in many places. So the Alumni Association is a key thing, and I like that you brought up. The Alumni Association is not just about raising money. It's also about connecting industry to university to solve problems. The problem with our universities in Nigeria is that when we talk alumni association, it's about come and donate money to us to build classroom. It has to go beyond that. How can we leverage the alumni network to say what is the problem of engineering? What is the problem of medicine? What's the problem of chemical industry? So that how can you, the alumni help us, industry alumni network help us to challenge our curriculum? Our universities are not using the alumni network well. Most of the alumni office relationship is about fundraising. And fundraising not for research, but fundraising to build a classroom. We have to do much better than that in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question there for you. What will academic institutions like the various universities of technology in Owerri, Minna, and Akure, and the Enugu State University of Technology modeled to achieve then? Have they failed to deliver the linkage between academia and industry?
I'm not very competent to answer this because I don't have the facts, so I do not want to answer the guess. But I would suspect that given where we are today, they could have done better, maybe.
And there's a second question there. How do we create an enabling environment to enhance sustainable collaboration by industry, academics, and government in the area of R&D in Africa?
So we need visionary leaders. Insurance science will say that there is a subjective role for individuals in history, that there are objective conditions for change, but you need subjective intervention of people, change agents, leaders, like Professor Ayo, like the Vice Chancellor, the Vice Chancellor of MIT, who had that vision. So the conditions were there. So I think we just need a combination of the objective conditions to identify and change agents. And things can happen. All of the things where all the ingredients of the discussions we have today address also that question today. They are all in the presentations today. In terms of how what different things that we can assemble together to solve. But one key thing is that a cluster geographic strategy is important. Africa is not very resourced. Societies are not very resourced. Therefore, rather than spread things all over the place, can we build around few places, concentrate resources and make it the best, so that the best talents, the best venture capital people, the best professors, the best research cannot be in one place. I will make sure that they have all the resources they need in terms of transportation, broadband, and everything is in one place. And that kind of a cluster strategy is going to be very important in terms of our industrial policy and development.
So it's another question there. Great, thank you for that, answering that. The next question says, great presentation, sir. The major problem in R&D in Africa is local funding. African researchers lack the support and partnership from the private and public sector. If this gap is not filled, researchers won't be encouraged. In Nigeria, for example, TED Fund covers universities. Not all research is actually funded. What of researchers that are not in universities?
Good question. Of course, that's part of the discussion that there's also knowledge production outside universities, and we need to tap into it. So I do not know TED Fund well, but my distant impression of the Tertiary Education Fund for our colleagues outside Nigeria is that most of the discussion on TED Fund is also largely around infrastructure, classroom. When people discuss TED Fund in Nigeria, nobody talks about research innovation. Everybody just talking about how to build the next amphitheater. That's what TED Fund does. So maybe one of the things is how do we re-engage TED Fund so that part of the money that we are just building the next classroom, the next amphitheater, can also be used to say, let's take a bit of more money to fund more research. But again, that has to be a function of how university approach it. Thank you. Sorry, Chairman.
Yeah, go on. I'll let you to, but I was going to quickly come in there. I think having been in a number of countries in the West, so Norway, Germany, and now UK, what I see is that our universities are in Africa are not proactive when it comes to seeking funding. I mean, my consultancy does find funding for university researchers. And these people actually come to you, talking to you about a solution they want, a problem they want to solve. And you find them who is funding these problems. So in Africa, and most often, they actually go to Africa and to our businesses, Dangotes, the other funding Western universities to solve African problems. The problem is that we have not been proactive enough actually to know our role in this whole situation. So if you ask, I mean, I take Professor Akanmu, for example, he's doing research here for solutions in Africa. And often the researchers in Africa says the money is not there, but not understanding our role is first thing, really. It's not TED Fund alone. TED Fund is not enough to do the real research you're looking to address the key societal problem. You do need universities to actually, researchers to actually take those steps themselves. And I appreciate what Professor Ayo, Charles Ayo is doing. That's amazing to actually just take the right steps here. Right, there's a question.
Yeah, I think we can take Professor Amechi, then we'll take the last question and move on. I think this has been a fantastic discussion after the presentation. I think what we want to do here is to set the pace, and these discussions are coming up a fantastic way for us to move on this conversation forward. But we have to move on. Let's give Professor Amechi the opportunity to speak now, and then we deal with the last question, and they will introduce the next item on the table.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't want to appear to be hogging the proverbial microphone here. I think the point Olu made about how to solve the problem, thinking about things that would need to happen. From my experience, I also think that even if you have the government, you have everybody ready, as academics, we also need to be prepared. Before I joined the academia, I was in management consulting. Probably that helped me to see how I can take my knowledge or my research from industry, from the academia to industry. But we also have a system in terms of producing academics where you have first degree, master's, PhD, no work experience. And that in itself might have implications for academics and their confidence. Sometimes when I relate to Nigerian, I understand Nigeria, pardon me if I use that as an example, a good number of academics are sometimes even, they appear timid when they're approaching big businesses or meeting Mr. Akanmu, for example, right, with his nice office and everything. So they feel intimidated sometimes. And you wonder. So I think there is a bit to be done about the confidence of our academics and our ability to reach out so that we are not blaming the government or TED Fund and so on and so forth. There is also a point. I've done my research not with government money. Most of my work have been funded by private money. And one thing I like about business is that once they see value, they pay for it. If you apply for a government grant here in the UK, for example, it takes a whole lot, maybe 6 months, 9 months before you get a grant. And it goes through all sort of inquiries and people want you to change your ideas, reviewers and so on and so forth. But for businesses, they see value, they pay. And Olu was thinking about, how they make decisions. So I think maybe there is also a time, Bright, I'm looking at you here, although you're not seeing me. Maybe there is where we can set out a period to say, how do we access private money? How do we work with companies? And we can bring academics who have that experience and also private companies that have funded research so that way we can continue to build the capacity beyond just highlighting the problems, but also preparing ourselves to tap into the opportunities. And one final point I want to make is there is also a role for Africans in diaspora. These days we ask people, when are you coming back? When are you in Lagos? When are you in Abuja? When are you in Dakar? We are where we are today, and we're having this conversation. China, India had a policy or a strategy of having their people in MIT or Stanford, but still connecting back home. How can the universities work with us? How can we can proactively, some of us in the diaspora, we can proactively reach out to the universities in Africa. And we have somebody like Professor Ayo here. I wish all the VCs are like him, because even when you present yourself, I know challenges I'm having with Unilag, for example, right? So, but that's by the way. But what I'm saying is that is a two-way thing, and Lulu talked about individuals acting as institutional entrepreneurs or change agents. So we also look at it from our personal perspective, see how we can be the change we want to see. But I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks very much, Professor Amechi. You mentioned something that is very important. How do we get ourselves started in how to tap into these funding resources that are there? I'm sure Mr. Olu and his establishment will want to fund academia to bring value to his system. As he spoke today, he said they have not seen anything to fund, which means there is money, but the academia has not tapped into that. As a platform, the Frontiers, our next training is about funding. How do you apply for funding? How do you develop the strategies to get funding, both from government, private sector, from the public? So those who are in the academia attending today, look out for the advert that we'll be sending. We'll have that training sometime in May. And within this seminar series, we have a session that is coming up in future editions, in which we are going to discuss issues of funding as it concerns African science. So please also look out for that. The fact is that we have provisions of how we can raise our capacity in dealing with these issues, because that is what we as academia are set up to do, to find money to do research that will bring value to the society and to our continent. Okay, I will show the last question we have here. Ike, over to you.
So the last question there, the other issue is that some universities are started with the aim of making money, but not value addition. How do we bring such universities to the realization that there is need and call to front the development of Africa?
Good question. I mean, it's amazing that anyone starting a university in Africa and their primary objective is to make money. It is obvious that they will fail in terms of developing, building, even the basic in terms of teaching and capacity. They are not going to do well. The fact is that universities are social purpose institutions. It should be sustainable in terms of its cash flow. But the big purpose, a university that is, I mean, we can see that, I mean, I don't want to be political. The way a university funds itself has to be different. If it does good, philanthropy money and other kind of money will come. Of course, the entrepreneurial university, like we are talking about, the MITs from its invention and so on, can also fund it, but not about how to make a margin on school fees and so on. I think that's probably more of the kind of things which are regulators, the National University Commissions and the equivalent in our African countries. They have to look at what exactly is the purpose of the university. If they see that it's like a secondary school glorified thing to make money, I'm not sure those kind of places should be given a license, in my view, because I believe universities are big social purpose institutions. They should be sustainable in terms of profit, but it cannot be about we're making 20 naira from the school fees and all those things the way we run the secondary school. Thank you.
Can I quickly make a comment there as well? I think there's a problem there in terms of the business model of most of these universities, because, I mean, making money, it shouldn't be a bad thing, but it's about what actually are you making money from? I mean, in the West here, with the universities, we are discussing how they structure their business model. Universities don't necessarily make money from the school fees, because that's not where the money comes from. And you can see that most universities is from their research, and you know, that's where their funding comes from. So really, if universities can really understand their purpose and relook at their business model, because they can actually make money if they understand where the money actually comes from.
Very correct. Well said.
Okay, Bright.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Olu Akanmu, for these very engaging discussions we have had this evening. I think it has been fantastic to see how you have really highlighted this joint or these linkages between the key players that should be driving societal development. I think the earlier we realize where we are and where we are going, I think the better we should take our steps to really put Africa where we belong. Anyway, we will ensure that this conversation continues. But now we have to move on to the next item on the table. We promise you that today's presentation will be longer than usual. So we have 1 hour additional we are going to take, so please be patient. What we have planned at the end of each quarter is that we'll bring some of our African scientists who are creating value to give us some inspiring aspect of their story, how they have moved their career. So we have 2 distinguished African women who will share their experience of driving their scientific career both in Africa and abroad. So we want this to be career stories that inspire both the older ones in scientific career or the younger ones who are coming up. But before we go into this discussion, I'm not going to make this introduction of those who will be speaking. I'll just put it on the screen so that you can read about it, but they will introduce themselves properly, because that is what the session is meant to tell us more about them. But before we get there, I would like us to stretch our legs. So please take 5 minutes and then let's get our legs stretched, and then we'll come back. We'll start exactly at 5 minutes to the hour, whatever time it is in your place. So what will happen is that I will distribute us to 2 breakout groups, and each breakout will have 1 speaker that will be speaking to them. And once we come back, I will give you more information. See you in 5 minutes.